God, take me now, the little girl said. But a millionaire saw her and did something shocking. Comment with what you thought of this story, giving it a score from 0 to 10, and tell me which city you're watching from. I really want to know if you like my story, and I want to get to know you better, so subscribe to my channel to support my work. I'm counting on your help. The fine December rain in Charlotte transformed the streets into dark mirrors, reflecting the Christmas lights that were already beginning to adorn the downtown shopping district. Arthur Cunningham adjusted his suit jacket as he walked hurriedly towards the mall's parking garage, his mind occupied with the sales spreadsheets he needed to review before the morning meeting. At 52, the owner of the largest supermarket chain in the region had learned that December was the most crucial month for business, and every minute lost meant wasted opportunities. The sound of a faint sob made him stop in the middle of the covered walkway. Arthur looked around, searching for the source of that noise, which seemed out of place amidst the hustle and bustle of the day's first shoppers. That's when he saw her, a small figure huddled near the main entrance, almost hidden behind one of the mall's decorative columns. The girl couldn't have been more than 4 years old, her brown hair stuck to her face by the dampness, her clothes soaked and dirty. She clutched a teddy bear against her chest, so worn out that its original color was barely distinguishable. Arthur approached slowly, the paternal instinct he believed he had buried years ago awakening against his will. God, take me now, the child whispered, her words coming out like a desperate prayer that made the businessman's heart stop for a moment. Arthur knelt in front of the girl, keeping a respectful distance. Hi, little one. What's your name? His voice came out softer than he expected, carrying a tenderness he hadn't felt in a long time. The child's large dark eyes lifted to him, revealing a deep fear mixed with a sadness no child should ever know. Isabella, she murmured, clutching the teddy bear even tighter. His name is Samson. Isabella is a very beautiful name. Where are your parents? Arthur looked around, searching for an adult who might be looking for her. But the normal mall traffic continued without any sign of urgency or concern. Mommy went away, Isabella answered, her voice so low he had to lean in to hear. She said she'd come back, but it's been a long time. The reality of the situation began to form in Arthur's mind. How long have you been here alone, Isabella? I can't count the days right, she admitted, wiping her nose with the back of her hand. But the man in the uniform who cleans the floor has passed by here 3 times when it was dark. 3 nights. The child had been alone for 3 days, surviving on leftover food and rainwater. Arthur felt a mix of outrage and compassion he hadn't experienced since his own life had fallen apart years ago. Are you hungry? He asked, already knowing the answer from the way Isabella looked at him with silent supplication. A little bit, she admitted, as if afraid to ask for too much. Arthur carefully extended his hand. How about we go get something warm to eat? I know a place nearby that makes the best hot chocolate in the city. Isabella hesitated for a moment, her small fingers squeezing Samson tighter. Then, slowly, she extended her free hand towards him. Her skin was cold and slightly rough, as if she had spent too much time exposed to the elements. In the food court cafe, Arthur watched Isabella devour a cinnamon roll and drink the hot chocolate as if it were her first decent meal in days, which was likely true. He tried to call social services, but something inside him made him hesitate before completing the call. Isabella, do you remember where you live? He asked gently. The girl shook her head, chocolate staining the corner of her mouth. Mommy said we had to leave home. We went to a place with lots of people, but it was noisy and I didn't like it. Then we came here and she told me to wait. Arthur felt something tighten in his chest. And she didn't say when she'd be back? She said she was going to fix things and come back soon, but sometimes adults lie so kids don't get sad. The maturity of that observation from someone so small was like a punch to Arthur's stomach. That's when he noticed something sticking out of the pocket of Isabella's faded pink dress. Carefully, he asked if he could see the paper. She agreed, handing him a crumpled, slightly damp note. The handwriting was feminine, nervous, clearly written under emotional distress. "My little one, Mommy needs to fix things that are broken. Take care of Samson and be a good girl. Hope will come back, I promise. I love you more than anything in the world." The name at the end of the note made Arthur frown. Hope. Why did that name sound familiar? He folded the paper carefully and returned it to Isabella, who put it away as if it were her most precious treasure. "Is Hope your mommy?" he asked. "Yes. She chose that name because she said there's always hope for better days." Isabella finished her chocolate and looked at him with expectation. "Are you going to take me to her?" The simple question carried a weight Arthur wasn't prepared to bear. How could he explain to a 4-year-old child that he had no idea where her mother was or when she would return? How could he say that she might not come back at all? "We'll find a way," was all he could manage to say, surprising himself with the conviction in his own voice. That afternoon, Arthur did something he hadn't planned. He took Isabella home. His mansion in the most exclusive neighborhood of Charlotte was as quiet as ever, the maids going about their routine chores in a space too large for a man alone. Diane, his housekeeper for over 15 years, appeared at the kitchen door as soon as she heard voices. She was a woman in her 60s, her grey hair always in a neat bun, who cared for the house with the zeal of someone who considered it her own family. "Mr. Cunningham, who is this little one?" she asked. But there was something in her expression that changed when her eyes landed on Samson, the teddy bear Isabella still held tightly. "This is Isabella. She'll be staying with us for a few days while we try to find her mother." The words left Arthur's mouth before he had time to think through their implications. Diane approached slowly, her eyes fixed on the worn-out toy. Where did you get this little bear, dear?" "Mommy gave it to me when I was a baby. She said he would always protect me." Isabella hugged Samson tighter, as if sensing that someone might try to take him from her. Diane's face visibly paled. Can I take a look at him?" Isabella hesitated, but something in the older woman's gentle voice convinced her to hand over the toy. Diane turned the bear upside down and searched for something in the seam. When she found what she was looking for, her hands trembled. "Arthur," she said, her voice filled with an emotion he had never heard before. "We need to talk." Diane held the teddy bear with trembling hands, examining a small tag sewn into the inside of the toy's belly. Arthur had never seen his housekeeper so shaken, not even when she had lost her husband 5 years ago. The silence in the kitchen stretched out like a heavy shadow, broken only by the sound of Isabella's nervous breathing. "This bear," Diane began, her voice barely a whisper. "I gave it to my daughter when she turned 4. I embroidered this tag with my own hands." She showed Arthur the almost faded letters. "For my brave girl, Mommy Diane." Arthur felt the floor move beneath his feet. "Diane, what are you saying?" "My daughter disappeared 4 years ago, Mr. Cunningham. She left home after a terrible argument and never came back. She only took a few clothes and this bear that I had given her to save for when she had children." Tears streamed freely down the woman's wrinkled face. Her name was Hope. Isabella looked from one adult to the other, trying to understand the tension that had settled in the room. "Does Grandma know my mommy?" she asked innocently. Diane knelt in front of the girl, her hands gently touching the small face. "My dear, I am your real grandma. Your mommy is my daughter." The phone rang at that moment, cutting through the revelation like a blade. Arthur answered mechanically, still processing what he had just discovered. It was his sister, Beatrice. "Arthur, where are you?" The meeting with the investors is in 2 hours, and you haven't even shown up at the office today." Beatrice's voice carried its usual impatience, that demanding tone he had known since childhood. "An unexpected situation came up. I'll be a little late." "What kind of situation? You know this negotiation could determine our expansion into the Carolinas. We can't mess this up now." Arthur looked at Isabella, who had snuggled into Diane's lap as if she had finally found her place in the world. "It's hard to explain over the phone. We'll talk later." "Arthur, you're worrying me. Ever since Clarice left, you've been a bit off, but this is different. What's going on?" "Beatrice, I have to go now. Handle the meeting for me. You know the numbers as well as I do." "But Arthur—" No, he hung up before his sister could continue protesting. Beatrice, at 47, was a determined woman who had dedicated her entire life to the family business, especially after becoming a minority partner. Her dedication was unquestionable, but sometimes her ambition worried Arthur. "Diane, I need to understand this story better. Why did Hope leave? What did you fight about?" The housekeeper sighed deeply, still stroking Isabella's hair. "It was because of work, Mr. Cunningham. Hope worked in the cleaning crew at your supermarkets, on the night shift. One day she came home saying she had discovered something terrible, that important people were doing wrong things." "What kind of things?" "She never wanted to tell me the details. She said it was too dangerous, that I could get hurt if I knew. She started getting paranoid, thinking she was being watched. I thought it was all in her head, you know. Sometimes working at night makes you imagine things." Arthur vaguely remembered a cleaning employee named Hope. She had been fired about 4 years ago for irregularities, but the details were fuzzy in his memory. At the time, he was going through his own personal problems and delegated many of the personnel issues to Beatrice and Walter, the accountant. "And after she was fired?" he asked. "She was furious. She said they had set her up, that someone had planted false evidence. We started fighting because I thought she was making up excuses to not take responsibility for her own mistakes." Diane wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "Our last conversation was horrible. I said things I regret to this day. She left the house yelling that she was going to prove her innocence, and that when she came back, I would have to ask for forgiveness." "And Isabella?" Arthur looked at the girl, who had fallen asleep in her grandmother's lap. "Hope was pregnant when she left home, but I didn't know. I just found that out now, seeing this child." Diane kissed Isabella's forehead tenderly. "She must have had the baby somewhere else, raised her alone all these years." The doorbell rang, interrupting the conversation. Walter Evans, the company's accountant, was at the door with a folder under his arm and a worried expression on his face. At 58, Walter was a meticulous man who had worked for the family for 15 years, always punctual and organized. "Arthur, Beatrice asked me to come here. She's worried about you. Said you cancelled important meetings and aren't answering your calls properly." Walter stopped when he saw Isabella sleeping in Diane's arms. "Who's the child?" "It's a long story, Walter. Come in. We need to talk." While Diane took Isabella to one of the guest rooms, Arthur told Walter about the encounter at the mall and the discovery of the family connection. The accountant listened with growing attention, taking notes in his little notebook as he always did when processing important information. "Arthur, do you remember the details of Hope Moore's dismissal?" Walter asked when Arthur finished his story. "Not really. I remember there was something about leaking information to competitors, but you and Beatrice handled everything." "Yes, but now that you mention it, some things seem strange in retrospect. Hope was always an exemplary employee. She had worked with us for 3 years, never had any disciplinary problems. The accusation came out of nowhere." "What kind of accusation exactly?" "Someone claimed to have seen her photographing documents in the administrative office during the night shift. When confronted, she vehemently denied it, but copies of confidential financial reports were found in her locker." Arthur frowned. Why would a cleaning employee have access to the administrative office? That was my question at the time, too. Beatrice explained that Hope had asked to clean that specific area because it offered extra pay. But when I investigated later, I found there was never any formal authorization for that. And who made the complaint? That's the strange part. The complaint was anonymous, came in by phone. We never found out who called. A shiver ran down Arthur's spine. Walter, do you think there could have been a mistake? That maybe Hope was innocent? At the time, I didn't question it because I trusted the procedures. But now, thinking about it, Walter hesitated, as if struggling with some conflicting loyalty. Arthur, can I ask you a confidential question? Of course. Have you checked the company's financial movements in recent years? I mean personally. No, I've always trusted you and Beatrice for that. Why? Because I've found some small but consistent discrepancies. Transfers that don't match authorizations. Payments to suppliers I can't fully trace. Walter opened his folder and showed some spreadsheets. Individually, they are insignificant amounts, but added up over 4 years. How much are we talking about? Approximately $300,000. The number hit Arthur like a punch. 300,000. How did this go unnoticed? Because it was done very cleverly. Small amounts, spread out over time, always in different categories. It looks more like accounting negligence than deliberate fraud. And who do you suspect? Walter looked around nervously, as if someone might be listening. Arthur, I don't want to make accusations without proof, but the person responsible for authorizing these payments would have to have access to the financial systems and a deep knowledge of the internal processes. Beatrice, Arthur murmured, the realization dawning on him like a stone. I didn't say that. But it's what you're thinking. Walter closed the folder. What I'm thinking is that maybe we should investigate what happened to Hope better. If she discovered something and tried to expose it, she might have been unjustly silenced. At that moment, Diane returned to the room. Isabella is asleep. The poor thing was exhausted. She sat down next to Arthur. Mr. Cunningham, I need to tell you something else about Hope. What is it? The night she left, she told me something that at the time I thought was a delusion of anger. She said she had discovered that someone in the family was stealing from the company and that she had proof. Arthur and Walter looked at each other. What kind of proof? Asked Walter. She said she had photographed documents, but not to sell to competitors. She said she was going to use them to show you, Mr. Cunningham, but that first she needed to understand the scheme better. And where are these photographs? I don't know. She said she had hidden everything in a safe place, that she would only reveal it when she was absolutely sure. The phone rang again. It was Beatrice, and her voice sounded more irritated than before. Arthur, the investors have already left. You missed the most important meeting of the year. They said they're going to reconsider the proposal because it calls our business seriousness into question. Beatrice, I don't want to hear excuses. Are you at home? I'm coming over now. We need to have a serious talk about your priorities. The call ended abruptly. Arthur looked at Walter and Diane, realizing that his life was about to get much more complicated than he imagined. She's coming here, he said, and when she sees Isabella... We'll have to explain everything, Walter completed. Diane stood up, smoothing her apron. Maybe it's the right time. Maybe we can finally find out the truth about what happened to my daughter. Outside, the sound of a car entering the garage announced Beatrice's arrival. Arthur took a deep breath, preparing for a conversation that would change everything forever. Beatrice entered the house like a hurricane, her high heels echoing on the marble floor of the entrance. At 47, she maintained an impeccable posture and a piercing gaze that had intimidated many suppliers over the years. Her grey suit was perfect as always, not a hair out of place, but Arthur could see the irritation simmering in her dark eyes. Arthur, what is this nonsense? You missed an $8 million meeting for what? She stopped abruptly upon noticing Walter in the room. What are you doing here? I didn't call you to come. Actually, you asked me to check on how he was, Walter replied calmly, closing his folder. And so, how is he? Because from what I can see, he's completely losing his mind. Arthur took a deep breath, knowing there was no way to postpone the conversation any longer. Beatrice, I need to tell you something important. I found an abandoned child today, and we discovered she has a connection to our family. What kind of connection? Beatrice's voice became sharper, a sign Arthur knew well from childhood. It was the tone she used when she felt something could affect her interests. Her mother is Hope Moore, Diane's daughter. Beatrice was silent for a few seconds, processing the information. Hope? The employee we fired for theft? The one who tried to sell our reports to competitors? About that, Beatrice, Walter intervened. I have some doubts about that case. I'd like to review the documents. What kind of doubts? The question came out drier than usual. Discrepancies in the procedures. Some things don't add up. Beatrice crossed her arms. Walter, that case was closed 4 years ago. The woman was caught red-handed with confidential documents. There's nothing to review. But if she was innocent, Arthur began, if she was innocent, she wouldn't have fled town when she was fired. Beatrice started pacing, a nervous habit Arthur had known since they were children. And where is this child you brought home? She's sleeping. Beatrice, she's 4 years old and was alone for 3 days. I couldn't leave her on the street. Of course you could. That's what social services are for. Arthur, you can't just adopt a random child because you're feeling lonely. Beatrice's words hurt more than she probably intended. Ever since Clarice had left 3 years ago, Arthur had indeed felt lost. But it wasn't just about loneliness. It was about purpose, about feeling that his life had meaning beyond the numbers on sales spreadsheets. That's not it, he replied, controlling his tone. It's about doing the right thing. The right thing would be to protect our company from potential legal problems. If this child's mother was a thief, who's to say she won't show up wanting to blackmail our family? Diane appeared at the living room door at that moment, carrying a tray with coffee. Her presence subtly changed the dynamic of the room. Beatrice always treated the housekeeper with a cold courtesy, very different from the genuine affection Arthur showed. "Good evening, Mrs. Beatrice," Diane said politely. "Good evening, Diane. I heard your daughter finally showed up after 4 years. The comment was like a slap. Diane placed the tray on the table with slightly trembling hands. "My daughter did not show up, Mom. She is missing. We only found her daughter." "Oh, of course, the granddaughter who conveniently appeared just when you need help." Beatrice picked up a coffee cup but didn't drink. What an interesting coincidence. Arthur stood up abruptly. "Beatrice, that's enough. Diane has been part of this family for 15 years. I will not allow you to speak to her that way." "Arthur, I'm not being disrespectful. I'm being realistic. An employee fired for theft disappears, and 4 years later, a child appears claiming to be our housekeeper's granddaughter. Don't you find that suspicious?" "What I find suspicious," said Walter, opening his folder again, "are these transfers I discovered in the accounting books. Beatrice, can you explain these payments to the company Delta Solutions?" Beatrice almost dropped the cup. "What payments?" 23 transfers over the last 4 years, always in small amounts, always authorized with your digital signature. "Walter, I authorize dozens of payments a week. I can't remember every supplier." "The problem is that Delta Solutions no longer exists. It was closed 3 years ago, but we continued making payments to it." The silence in the room became heavy. Arthur watched his sister's face, looking for any sign of guilt or nervousness, but Beatrice had always been good at controlling her expressions. "It must be a system error," she finally said. "Or maybe the company changed its name and we didn't update our records." "I checked that too. There is no successor company. The business registration has been cancelled since 2021. Then investigate it properly and fix the error. That's what we pay you for." Beatrice placed the cup on the table with more force than necessary. "Arthur, can we talk alone?" Walter gathered his papers. "I'll be leaving anyway, but Arthur, I think we should schedule an external audit of the accounting books, just to be sure everything is in order." After the accountant left, Beatrice turned to Arthur with an expression he couldn't completely decipher. "Arthur, what is happening to you? First you bring a strange child home, now you're doubting me. We're siblings, we've worked together for 20 years. It's precisely because we're siblings that I'm worried. Walter never makes frivolous accusations. Walter is getting old and paranoid. Those numbers probably have simple explanations." Beatrice sat on the sofa, her rigid posture softening slightly. "Arthur, ever since Clarice left you haven't been the same. I understand you're looking for some purpose, but bringing a strange child home is not the solution. Isabella is not a stranger. She is Diane's granddaughter. Alleged granddaughter. Do you have any proof of that besides the word of a housekeeper and a teddy bear?" The question was valid, Arthur had to admit. "No, not yet, but I can do a DNA test." "And if it's negative, are you going to get attached to the child and then find out you were deceived? And if it's positive, am I going to find out that we unjustly fired the mother of an innocent child?" Beatrice sighed. "Arthur, even if Hope was innocent of the leak accusations, it doesn't mean she was a good mother. She abandoned her own daughter. Or she was forced to abandon her by circumstances we don't understand yet." At that moment, a soft sound came from the upper floor. Isabella had woken up and was crying softly. Diane immediately headed for the stairs, but Arthur followed her. The guest room was dimly lit by the hallway light. Isabella was sitting on the bed, hugging Samson, with tears streaming down her face. "I dreamed about the place with the colored boxes," she said when she saw Arthur approach. "What place, dear?" asked Diane, sitting on the edge of the bed. "A big place, with lots of colored boxes and a sweet smell. Mommy took me there once and told me to be quiet while she worked." Arthur felt something cold run down his spine. "Isabella, do you remember anything else about this place?" "There were many lights on the ceiling and people pushing big carts, and there was a song that always played." She began to hum a simple melody, which Arthur recognized immediately. It was the background music from the supermarket sound system. "My God," murmured Diane. "She's talking about the central warehouse." Beatrice had come up behind them and was standing at the bedroom door, her face visibly pale. "This proves nothing. Many children have visited our supermarkets. But the central warehouse is only accessible to authorized employees," Arthur said slowly, "and Hope worked in cleaning. She had no reason to take a child there. Unless," Diane continued, "she had discovered something there that she needed to investigate further." Isabella wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "Grandma, when is Mommy coming back?" "We don't know yet, my dear, but we will find her." "Promise?" Diane looked at Arthur, who nodded slightly. "I promise." After they managed to get Isabella back to sleep, the three adults went down to the living room. Beatrice was visibly agitated, pacing again. "Arthur, this situation is getting out of control. If this child was really in the warehouse, if her mother really discovered something—" "What? What are you trying to say?" "I'm trying to say that maybe it would be better for everyone if we sent the girl to social services and forgot this whole story." "Beatrice, I'm not being cruel. I'm being practical. Our company is about to close the biggest deal in its history. If some scandal comes to light now—" "What kind of scandal?" Arthur's question sounded more like an accusation. Beatrice stopped walking and faced him directly. "I don't know about any scandal, But if Hope was inventing conspiracy theories and involving her own daughter, or if she really discovered something she shouldn't have, interrupted Diane quietly. "What are you implying?" asked Beatrice, her voice becoming dangerously low. "I'm not implying anything, Mrs. Beatrice. I just think we should look for my daughter and find out the truth." Beatrice looked at the clock. "It's late. I'm going home. Arthur, think carefully about what you're doing. A wrong decision could destroy everything our family has worked for." After she left, Arthur sat heavily on the sofa. Diane remained standing, nervously arranging objects on the coffee table. "Mr. Cunningham," she said finally, "there's something else I need to tell you about the night Hope left." "What is it?" "She said she was sure someone in the family was behind the irregularities, and that this person knew she had found out." Arthur closed his eyes. "And did she have suspicions about who it was?" "She did, but she never wanted to tell me the name. She only said it was someone you trusted completely." The weight of this revelation fell on Arthur like an avalanche. Someone he trusted completely. The options were limited. Walter, who had just discovered the irregularities as well, or Beatrice, his own sister, who was clearly nervous about the whole situation. Outside, the sound of a car returning made Arthur look out the window. To his surprise, it was Beatrice. She had come back and was standing on the sidewalk talking on the phone to someone. Even from a distance, he could see she was agitated. "Diane," he said, "I think our night isn't over yet." Arthur watched Beatrice through the curtain, trying to decipher what she was saying on the phone. His sister gestured nervously, something she rarely did in public. After a few minutes, she hung up and stood on the sidewalk for a while longer, as if making a difficult decision. Finally, she got back in the car and drove away, leaving Arthur with more questions than answers. "She came back just to make a call," he murmured to Diane. "Maybe she didn't want us to hear the conversation," the housekeeper replied, adjusting the hair that had escaped her bun during the night's commotion. The next day, Arthur woke up earlier than usual. The previous day's events had left his mind in a turmoil, and he had barely slept. When he went down to the kitchen, he found Diane preparing breakfast with special care. There were pancakes, fresh orange juice, and even fruit cut into fun shapes. "For Isabella," she explained when she noticed Arthur's curious gaze. "I want her to feel at home." Isabella came down a few minutes later, still sleepy but visibly more rested. She was wearing one of the pajamas Diane had improvised from an old T-shirt of Arthur's, and she carried Samson under her arm. "Good morning, Uncle Arthur," she said, naturally using the affectionate term that made his heart ache. "Good morning, little one. Did you sleep well?" "I slept. I dreamed about Mommy. She was in a white place and said she was trying to come back to me." Diane and Arthur exchanged worried glances. Isabella's words had a prophetic tone that was disturbing in such a young child. During breakfast, Arthur decided to ask Isabella some careful questions about her memories. He found out that she remembered living in at least 3 different places with her mother in the last 2 years, always moving when bad people showed up looking for them. "Mommy said we had to be invisible," Isabella explained, licking honey from her fingers, "that there were people who didn't want her to tell the truth." "What kind of truth?" Arthur asked gently. "I don't know. She never explained it to me properly. She just said that when I grew up, she would tell me about the important papers she kept." Arthur felt a shiver. "Important papers?" "Yes. She had a small box that she always took with us when we moved. She said that one day those papers would make the bad men pay for what they did." Diane let out a small gasp. "My daughter was always stubborn. When she decided something was wrong, she wouldn't rest until she proved it." The phone rang, interrupting the conversation. It was Walter, and he sounded agitated. "Arthur, I need to talk to you urgently. I found something about those transfers I mentioned yesterday." What did you find? I'd rather not talk on the phone. Can I come to your house? Of course. But Walter, is it something serious? Very serious. And I think Beatrice shouldn't be part of this conversation. While they waited for Walter to arrive, Arthur took Isabella to see the house's garden. The girl was enchanted with the flowers, and especially with a small fountain in the center of the patio. She sat on the edge and started talking to the goldfish as if they were old friends. "Uncle Arthur," she said suddenly, "did you know my daddy?" The question caught him off guard. "I don't know, little one. Did your mom never tell you about him?" She said my daddy was a good man who didn't know I existed, that one day, when things were safe, she would tell him about me." "Do you remember his name?" Isabella shook her head. "I only remember that Mommy said he worked with numbers like Grandpa Walter." Arthur frowned. Isabella had called Walter Grandpa, even though she had never met him before. "Why do you call him Grandpa?" "Because Mommy always talked about Grandpa Walter when she told stories about her work. She said he was the only honest man in the place with the colored boxes." When Walter arrived, Isabella ran to hug him as if he were really her grandfather. The accountant was visibly moved by the girl's warm reception. "She's just like Hope when she was a child," he said to Arthur, stroking Isabella's hair. Hope was always a special girl, smart, observant, stubborn when she believed in something. "You knew Hope well?" Arthur asked, surprised. "Of course. She was my niece." The silence that followed was deafening. Arthur looked from Walter to Diane, trying to process this new information. "Niece? What do you mean, niece?" "Diane is my sister," Walter explained calmly. "We don't talk about it at work because I've always kept my personal and professional life separate. But when Hope started working at the supermarkets, it was through my recommendation." Diane approached her brother, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "Walter tried to convince me to look for Hope after she left, but I was too hurt to listen." "And now," Walter said, opening his folder, "I've discovered that our family was used as a pawn in a game much bigger than we imagined." He spread documents on the garden table. They were bank statements, transfer records, and copies of contracts Arthur had never seen before. "The company Delta Solutions was a front," Walter explained, "but I traced the real recipients of the money. The transfers went to a personal account of Beatrice's." Arthur felt the ground move beneath his feet. "This can't be right." "It is, and there's more. I found records of a private investigation that Beatrice hired 4 years ago. The target of the investigation was Hope." "What kind of investigation?" "Complete. Personal life, relationships, financial history, and according to the report, Hope was pregnant and trying to find out who the father of the child was." Isabella, who was playing with the fish, suddenly looked at them. "Is Grandpa Walter talking about Mommy?" "We are, dear," Walter replied gently. "We're trying to understand what happened to her." "I can help. I know a lot of things Mommy told me." The 3 adults looked at each other. Arthur knelt to Isabella's level. "What did your mother tell you, little one?" "She said she found out that a bad woman was taking money that wasn't hers, and that this bad woman got scared when she learned that Mommy had seen the papers." "And what else?" "Mommy said the bad woman tried to make it look like Mommy was the thief, but Mommy was smart and kept copies of everything." Walter leaned forward. "Isabella, did your mother tell you where she kept these copies?" "She kept them in the place where the birds sleep." The adults were confused by the metaphorical answer. "What place is that, dear?" "I can't explain it right, but Mommy took me there once. It was a high place with many little windows, and there were birds making nests outside." Diane gasped. "The old church office. Hope had the keys because she helped with the cleaning there too." Arthur stood up quickly. "We have to go there now." "Wait," Walter said, holding his friend's arm. "If Beatrice finds out we're investigating." "It's too late to worry about that. She already knows we suspect something." At that moment, Arthur's cell phone rang. It was a message from Beatrice. Emergency meeting today at 2 p.m. Subject, future of the company, attendance mandatory. She's trying to force us into a confrontation, Arthur murmured. Or she's trying to buy time to hide evidence, Walter said. Arthur, I think we should go to the church first, before the meeting. And Isabella? She stays with me, Diane said immediately. I don't want her to get any more involved in this until we know what we're facing. An hour later, Arthur and Walter were at the old church in downtown Charlotte. The priest received them with surprise, but when they explained that they were looking for something Hope had left in the office 4 years ago, he allowed them to go up to the small attic that served as an archive. The place was exactly as Isabella had described, a small space with several small windows, bird nests visible from the outside. They searched for over an hour before Walter found a small box hidden behind a shelf of old religious books. Inside the box were photographs of documents, recordings of conversations on a small recorder, and a letter addressed to whoever finds this truth. Arthur opened the letter with trembling hands. If someone is reading this, it means something has happened to me. I discovered that Beatrice Cunningham has been embezzling money from the company for years. They are not large amounts, but they are constant. She created ghost companies and uses her brother's digital signature to authorize the payments. I have proof of everything. I also discovered that she tried to frame me by planting false documents in my locker. I don't know how far she is capable of going to protect her secrets, but I fear for my daughter's future. If something happens to me, please protect Isabella and tell Arthur the truth. He is a good man and deserves to know that his trust has been betrayed. Hope Moore. Walter finished reading the letter in silence, his hands trembling slightly. Arthur, your sister not only stole from the company, she destroyed a family to cover up her own crimes. And now she knows we're close to the truth, Arthur murmured, looking at the clock. It was 2 o'clock. The meeting with Beatrice was scheduled to start. She's going to try something at the meeting, Walter said. Maybe try to force you to sell your share of the company. Or maybe try something worse. Arthur put the evidence in Walter's folder. Let's face her. But first, we need to make sure Isabella is safe. When they returned to the house, they found Diane and Isabella playing in the garden. The peaceful scene contrasted sharply with the storm that was about to come. Diane, Arthur said, take Isabella to a relative's house today. I don't want her to be here when we confront Beatrice. Why, Uncle Arthur? Isabella asked, sensing the tension in the air. Because some adults are going to have a very important conversation, and we want you to be safe. Isabella hugged him tightly. Are you going to find my mommy? We're going to try, little one. I promise we'll try. As Diane packed a bag for Isabella, Arthur looked out the window and saw a black car parked at the corner. The driver seemed to be watching the house. His blood ran cold when he realized that Beatrice wasn't planning to wait until 2 o'clock to make her move. The black car remained parked at the corner for another 15 minutes before finally driving off. Arthur watched through the gap in the curtain until he was sure it had completely disappeared from the street. Walter, who was also watching, let out a sigh of relief. Arthur, I think it's better if we don't go to the meeting unprepared, the accountant said, checking his phone nervously. Beatrice is clearly planning something. I agree, but we can't run forever. She has too much power in the company to ignore. Diane appeared in the living room, carrying a small suitcase and holding Isabella's hand. The girl seemed confused by the sudden rush, but she trusted the adults around her. I'll take her to my cousin Connie's house in the North Lake neighborhood, Diane said. It's a place Beatrice doesn't know. Isabella tugged on Arthur's shirt. Uncle, you promised to find my mommy. You won't forget, right? I will never forget that promise, he replied, kneeling to be at her level. But first, I need to sort out some complicated adult things. Is the bad woman trying to hurt you too? Isabella's perception always surprised Arthur. We won't let that happen, little one. After Diane and Isabella left, Arthur and Walter headed to the company office. The 5-story building in downtown Charlotte had been the pride of the Cunningham family for decades. Arthur remembered when he was a child, and his father would take him to see the empire we're building together. Now, riding the elevator up to the top-floor meeting room, he felt that this empire was about to crumble. Beatrice was already waiting when they arrived, sitting at the head of the conference table as she always did. But there was something different about her posture today. She seemed more tense, more calculating. Next to her was a man Arthur didn't know, a man in a dark suit, small glasses, and a leather briefcase. "Arthur, Walter, please sit down," Beatrice said, her voice too controlled to be natural. "This is Dr. Marcus Reed, our new legal consultant." "New consultant?" Arthur asked, not hiding his surprise. "Since when do we need legal consultation?" "Since we discovered certain irregularities in the accounting books that could cause us serious problems," Beatrice replied, opening a folder in front of her. Walter and Arthur looked at each other. It was obvious she was trying to turn the tables, accusing them before they could accuse her. "What kind of irregularities?" Walter asked, keeping his voice calm despite the tension. Dr. Reed spoke for the first time. "Unauthorized transfers, duplicate payments, discrepancies between internal reports and those sent to the IRS." "And you think I'm responsible for this?" Walter asked, feigning disbelief. "The records show that all suspicious transactions were processed with your authorization code," Beatrice said, sliding some papers across the table. Arthur quickly examined the documents. At first glance, they did seem to show Walter as responsible for the irregularities, but something was wrong. "Beatrice, these codes are different from the ones Walter normally uses," he observed. "Codes can be easily changed by someone with access to the systems," Dr. Reed replied. "The important thing is that all evidence points to a systematic manipulation of the accounting books." "And what is your proposal?" Arthur asked, beginning to understand where the conversation was heading. "Simple," Beatrice said, finally showing her cards. "Walter retires immediately and takes full responsibility for the irregularities. In return, we don't press criminal charges against him." "And me?" Arthur asked. "You need to make a difficult decision about the future of the company. With these accounting scandals, our reputation is at risk. The investors are already backing out." Dr. Reed opened his briefcase and took out a thick document. "We have here a proposal for the sale of your part of the company to your sister. The value is fair, considering the circumstances." Arthur quickly leafed through the contract. The offered value was about half of what his share was really worth. "Beatrice, this is extortion." "This is the reality of business, Arthur. A company with legal problems is worth much less on the market. And if I refuse to sign, then the evidence against Walter goes to the authorities today, and you will face an IRS investigation that could destroy not only your reputation, but also your freedom." Walter, who had remained silent, finally spoke up. "Beatrice, you are making a very big mistake." "I'm not making any mistake. I'm protecting what's left of this company after your incompetence." My incompetence?" Walter opened his own folder, pulling out the evidence they had found at the church. "Or are you trying to cover up your own crimes?" Beatrice's face visibly paled when she saw the photographs of the documents Hope had hidden. Dr. Reed leaned over to examine the papers, his expression changing rapidly. "Where did you get this?" Beatrice asked, trying to keep her voice controlled. "From the same person you destroyed to protect your secrets," Arthur replied. "Hope Moore documented everything, Beatrice. Your shell companies, the embezzlement, even how you planted false evidence to frame her." Dr. Reed abruptly closed his briefcase. "Mrs. Beatrice, I think we should reevaluate this situation." "There is nothing to reevaluate," she said, but her voice was now visibly trembling. These documents could be forgeries. Including the conversation recordings? Walter asked, placing the small recorder on the table. Hope was smarter than you thought. Beatrice stood up abruptly, knocking over her chair in the process. This means nothing. That woman was unstable. Everyone knows that. Everyone knows because you spread that version after destroying her life, Arthur said, his anger finally boiling over. My own sister. How could you do this? I did what was necessary to protect our company. That woman was meddling where she shouldn't have been. She was doing her job, and she found out you were stealing from our own family. Dr. Reed stood up. Gentlemen, I think I should excuse myself. This is clearly not a matter that can be resolved today. Dr. Reed, you're not going anywhere, Walter said firmly. As a legal consultant, you need to know that your client has just confessed to participating in corporate fraud. I didn't confess to anything. You just admitted you knew about Hope's investigations and did what was necessary to protect the company. Arthur was on his feet now, his hands trembling with anger. Beatrice, where is Hope? How would I know where an employee fired 4 years ago is? Because you are responsible for what happened to her after she was fired. Isabella said they were forced to move several times because bad people were chasing them. Isabella? Who is Isabella? Your niece, the daughter of Hope that you helped make an orphan. Beatrice fell silent for a long moment, processing this information. Hope had a daughter? As if you didn't know. Walter pushed more documents across the table. Your private investigation reports include information about her pregnancy. Dr. Reed, who was trying to discreetly leave the room, was stopped by Arthur. Doctor, you will need to stay as a witness. Witness to what? To the moment my sister tells us where Hope Moore is. Beatrice sat down heavily, her hands covering her face. For a moment, Arthur saw not the ambitious businesswoman she had become, but the younger sister who cried when her toys were broken in childhood. Arthur, she finally said, her voice broken. You don't understand the pressure I was under at the time. Then explain it to me. The company was going through difficulties. The investors were threatening to withdraw their support. I needed money to keep everything running. And you thought stealing was the solution. It wasn't stealing. I always planned to return everything when the situation improved. Beatrice lifted her face, tears streaming down her cheeks. But Hope found out and started asking questions. And then you decided to destroy her life. I tried to talk to her first. I offered her money to keep quiet, but she said it wasn't about money, it was about principle. So you planted false evidence. I panicked. I thought if she was fired for cause, no one would believe her accusations. Walter leaned forward. But that wasn't enough, was it? You hired people to harass her after she left town. No, I swear I didn't do that. After she left, I thought the problem was solved. Then why did she spend 4 years running and hiding? Beatrice fell silent, as if she were fighting against a revelation she didn't want to make. Beatrice, Arthur said, his voice softer now, if you have any information about where Hope is, you need to tell us. She has a 4-year-old daughter who needs her mother. I really don't know where she is now, Beatrice finally said, but there's something you need to know about why she really ran away. What? It wasn't just because of the embezzlement she discovered. It was because she found out who the child's father is. The silence in the room was absolute. Arthur felt a cold run down his spine. And who is the father? Walter asked. Beatrice looked directly at Arthur. Her eyes filled with a mixture of guilt and despair. It's you, Arthur. Isabella is your daughter. Arthur's world crumbled at that moment. He clung to the edge of the conference table, feeling his legs weaken. Beatrice's words echoed in his mind like a distorted echo he couldn't fully process. That's impossible, he murmured. his voice coming out strangled. I never. Hope and I never. Remember the end-of-year party in 2019? Beatrice asked, her own tears flowing freely now. You were devastated because Clarice had asked for a separation the week before. You drank more than you should have, as you never did. Arthur closed his eyes, trying to remember that night. It had been one of the lowest points of his life. Clarice had left home with just one suitcase, saying she could no longer live with a man who was more married to his work than to her. Hope was working that night, Beatrice continued. On the night shift, post-party cleaning, you came back to the office because you had forgotten your car keys. Fragments of memory began to form in Arthur's mind. He vaguely remembered finding Hope in the office, talking to her. She had offered him coffee, shown compassion for his situation. She had been kind when he needed kindness the most. We talked, he said slowly. She was very understanding, but nothing else happened. Arthur, Walter said softly, you were very drunk that night. Maybe you don't remember everything. No, I would remember that. I would never take advantage of an employee, especially in a moment of vulnerability. Dr. Reed, who had remained silent during the revelation, finally spoke up. Gentlemen, this conversation is getting out of the professional scope. Maybe we should... Shut up, Beatrice said sharply. You don't understand anything about this family. Arthur turned to his sister, his eyes burning with anger and confusion. How do you know this? How can you be sure? Because Hope came to tell me 3 months later when she found out she was pregnant. She was desperate, didn't know what to do. And what did you say to her? I said she was lying, that she was trying to blackmail our family. Beatrice lowered her head, ashamed. I said that if she spread that story, I would make sure she never got another job in Charlotte. Walter stood up abruptly. Beatrice, you threatened a pregnant woman. I was protecting Arthur. He had just separated. He was destroyed. If this story got out... You were protecting yourself, Arthur accused. If I found out I had a daughter, I might have become more interested in the company's details. I might have discovered your theft sooner. It wasn't just that. Arthur, you were in a deep depression. The news of an unplanned pregnancy could have led you to... To what? To suicide? Is that what you're implying? Beatrice's silence was answer enough. Arthur walked to the window, looking out at the city he had helped build with decades of work. Now everything seemed different, tainted by betrayals and secrets that poisoned every achievement. Hope tried to tell me several times after that, Beatrice continued, her voice almost a whisper, but I always stopped her, always found a way to keep her away from you. And when she discovered your embezzlements, she said that if I didn't stop stealing and confess everything to you, she would tell you about Isabella. She said you had the right to know your daughter. That's why you framed her. I panicked. I thought that if she was discredited because of the supposed leaks, no one would believe anything else she said. Walter shook his head in disbelief. Beatrice, you destroyed an entire family to protect your crimes. I didn't know she was going to run away from the city. I thought she would just find another job and move on with her life. But she ran away because you made her look like a criminal, Arthur said, turning to face his sister, and she took my daughter away from me. Your alleged daughter, Dr. Reed corrected. Without a DNA test, this is just speculation. Arthur looked at the lawyer with contempt. Doctor, you can leave now. Your services are no longer needed. But Mrs. Beatrice hired. Mrs. Beatrice no longer has the authority to hire anyone on behalf of this company. Arthur picked up the documents on the table. From now on, she is suspended from all administrative duties while we investigate the full extent of her crimes. Beatrice stood up in desperation. Arthur, you can't do this. I'm a partner in the company. A minority partner who committed fraud against the company. I can, and I will. But Arthur, if Isabella is really your daughter, if Isabella is my daughter, that makes your crimes even more serious. You not only stole from the company, but you also prevented me from knowing my own daughter for 4 years. Dr. Reed headed for the door quickly. Gentlemen, I will excuse myself. This situation requires specialized legal advice. After the lawyer left, the 3 family members were left alone in the meeting room. The silence was heavy, laden with years of lies and resentment. Beatrice, Walter finally said, you need to tell us everything you know about where Hope might be. I really don't know. After she left town, I never heard from her again. But you hired investigators to pursue her. No, I swear I didn't do that. After she left, I thought the problem was solved. Arthur sat down heavily in one of the chairs. Then why did Isabella say they were pursued by bad people? Maybe she's paranoid. Or maybe... Beatrice hesitated. Maybe what? Maybe other people found out about the embezzlement and tried to use Hope in some way. Walter frowned. What other people? Our competitors, suppliers who weren't paid properly because of the embezzlement. Arthur, when you embezzle $300,000 over 4 years, many people are affected indirectly. Arthur felt a nausea growing in his stomach. Beatrice, how many people knew about Isabella? Just me, as far as I know. Are you sure? Hope was very private. I don't think she told anyone else. And the medical records, the birth, could someone else have found out? Beatrice fell silent, as if she were remembering something important. What is it? Walter asked. There's something I didn't tell you. Hope didn't have her prenatal care here in Charlotte. She moved to Asheville during her pregnancy, claiming she wanted to stay away from the prying eyes of the city. And you didn't find that strange? At the time, I thought she was being paranoid. Now I realize she was protecting herself. Arthur stood up again. We have to go to Asheville. If Hope gave birth there, she might have left a trail. Arthur, that was 4 years ago. What kind of trail do you expect to find? Hospital records, addresses where she lived, people who knew her, anything that can lead us to her. At that moment, Arthur's cell phone rang. It was Diane, and her voice sounded desperate. Mr. Cunningham, something terrible has happened. What is it, Diane? Isabella has disappeared. I left for 5 minutes to buy medicine for my cousin, and when I came back she was gone. Arthur's blood ran cold. What do you mean, disappeared? My cousin said a woman came looking for her. She said she was family and had permission to pick her up. What woman? A well-dressed woman with short hair. She knew Isabella's name and said you had sent her. Arthur looked directly at Beatrice, who had turned completely pale. Beatrice, he said, his voice dangerously low. What did you do? I didn't do anything. I swear to God, Arthur, I didn't send anyone to get the girl. Then who was it? I don't know. Walter approached them. Beatrice, did you tell anyone where Isabella was hidden? No. How would I know where she was? Because you had someone follow Diane when she left the house today. Beatrice opened and closed her mouth several times, as if struggling with a confession. Beatrice, Arthur shouted, my daughter is in danger because of you. It wasn't my idea, she finally exploded. Someone called me this morning. A woman. She said she knew about Isabella and that if I didn't cooperate, she would tell the press everything. What woman? What name did she give? She said her name was Clarice. The name hit Arthur like a lightning bolt. Clarice, his ex-wife, had returned to Charlotte without him knowing. And now she was with Isabella. Arthur, Walter said, touching his arm, this might not be what it seems. What do you mean? If Clarice found out about Isabella, maybe she came to get her to protect the girl, to take her out of all this conflict. Or, Beatrice said, her voice filled with a new fear, she came to use the child against me, to force me to confess everything publicly. Arthur grabbed his keys. "There's only one way to find out. I'm going to find Clarice." "Arthur, wait," Walter said. "If Clarice really took Isabella, she must have taken the girl to a safe place. Maybe we should try to talk to her first." "Talk? My daughter is with a woman who hates me and who might be using her as a pawn in a game of revenge. But if you go out searching desperately, you might end up scaring Isabella even more." Arthur stopped at the door of the room, breathing heavily. Walter was right, but every paternal instinct that had awakened in recent days screamed for him to run after his daughter. "Beatrice," he said without turning around, "you're going to give me the phone number Clarice used to call, and you're going to tell me exactly what she said." "She said she knew about my crimes, about Isabella, about everything, and that if I didn't hand over the girl voluntarily, she would make sure the truth leaked out in a way that would destroy not just me, but the entire Cunningham family." Arthur turned around slowly. "And you handed over my daughter to protect your own skin?" I thought it would be better for everyone. Clarice can take good care of the girl." "Clarice could be planning to use my daughter to destroy me too." Arthur looked at Beatrice with a mixture of anger and sadness. "You not only stole from the company and ruined Hope's life, now you've handed over a 4-year-old child to a woman who has reason to hate me. Arthur, I don't want to hear your excuses anymore." He headed for the door. "I'm going to find Isabella, and when I do, you and I are going to have a final conversation about the future of this family." When Arthur left the room, Beatrice collapsed into her chair, finally understanding the enormity of her actions. She had started by stealing small amounts to save the company. Now she had destroyed her own family and put an innocent child in danger. Outside the building, Arthur called Diane while walking quickly towards his car. "Diane, I need you to meet me at the main hospital in Asheville in 2 hours. We're going to look for records about Isabella's birth." "But Mr. Cunningham, what if Mrs. Clarice?" "If Clarice has hurt my daughter," he said, his voice filled with a determination she had never heard before, "she's going to find out there's a side of me she doesn't know yet." The drive from Charlotte to Asheville had never seemed so long. Arthur drove above the speed limit, his thoughts oscillating between anger at Beatrice and fear of what Clarice might be planning with Isabella. The phone rang several times during the journey, but he ignored all calls that weren't from Diane or Walter. When he arrived at the main hospital in Asheville, Diane was already waiting in the reception, her eyes red from crying. She stood up immediately upon seeing him, running to hug him, as if he were her only hope of finding her granddaughter. "Did you get any information about Clarice?" he asked, returning the hug. "Nothing. I called all the hotels in the city, but no one has a record of a woman with that name. She could be using a fake name, or she could be staying in a neighboring town." They went to the information desk, where a middle-aged receptionist attended to them with professional friendliness. Arthur explained that he needed information about a birth that had occurred 4 years ago, providing Hope Moore's full name. "Sir, information about births is confidential," the receptionist said. "You would need a court order or to be a direct relative." "I am the child's father," Arthur said, surprising himself with how easily the words came out. "Do you have any document that proves that?" Arthur hesitated. Technically, he had no proof, only Beatrice's confession and his own growing suspicions. "The child's mother has been missing for 4 years, Diane intervened, "and the girl is in danger. Please, we need any information." The receptionist looked from one to the other, clearly moved by the situation. "Let me talk to my supervisor." While they waited, Arthur received a call from Walter. The accountant had stayed in Charlotte to monitor Beatrice's movements and try to find more information about Clarice's whereabouts. "Arthur, I've discovered some important things," Walter said, his voice tense. "Clarice was in contact with a lawyer here in Charlotte last week." "What kind of lawyer? a specialist in family law and child custody. Apparently she's trying to file for adoption. Arthur felt his stomach turn. Adoption of Isabella? It seems so. And there's more. I found out that Clarice has a temporary search and seizure warrant issued last night. How is that possible? She doesn't even know Isabella. Apparently, she claimed that the child was in a situation of abandonment and risk, living with unauthorized people. She must have used the information Beatrice gave her. Arthur had to lean against the wall to keep from falling. Walter, does this mean Clarice can legally take Isabella? Temporarily, yes, until the situation is reassessed by a judge. And how long could that take? Weeks, maybe months, especially if she can prove that you are not fit to care for a child. The call was interrupted when the hospital supervisor appeared, a 50-year-old woman with a serious but compassionate expression. Mr. Cunningham? I'm Dr. Mariana, supervisor of the records department. I understand you're looking for information about a birth. Yes, doctor. The situation is delicate. The child's mother disappeared, and now the girl is in danger. I understand. I managed to find the birth record of Isabella Moore, born on March 15th, 2020, but there's something peculiar in the documents. What is it? The field for the father is blank, and there's a note from the mother requesting total confidentiality about the child's identity. Diane approached. Confidentiality? Why would my daughter ask for that? According to the notes of the head nurse at the time, the mother was visibly frightened. She said there were people who could hurt the child if they discovered her existence. Arthur exchanged glances with Diane. Doctor, is it possible to speak with someone who was present during the birth? The head nurse from that time still works here. I can call her, if you wish. 15 minutes later, they were sitting in a small meeting room with Nurse Carmen, a robust 60-year-old woman who had assisted in Isabella's birth. I remember her well, Carmen said as soon as Arthur mentioned Hope's name. She was a very young, very scared girl. She came for prenatal care here initially using a fake name. Fake name? Yes. She first registered as Maria Smith. She only revealed her real name when she went into labor because she needed the documents to register the child. Did she say why she was using a fake name? Diane asked. She said she was running from bad people who wanted to hurt her and the baby. She even asked us to register the birth with a different date than the real one. And did you do that? Of course not, but we understood that she was really afraid of something. Arthur leaned forward. Nurse, did she ever mention who the child's father was? She never wanted to talk about it. But once, when she was under the effect of pain medication, she murmured a name. What name? Arthur. She said several times, Arthur, forgive me. The silence in the room was absolute. Arthur felt as if all the pieces of a terrible puzzle were finally falling into place. Was there anything else she said? Diane asked, her voice almost a whisper. Yes. She said he was a good man, that he deserved to know his daughter, but that she couldn't tell because they would hurt the child. Who were they? I never knew. But she was very afraid that someone would find out where she was. Arthur stood up, walking to the window. Outside, Asheville went about its normal life, oblivious to the drama unfolding in that small room. Nurse Carmen, he said without turning around. After Isabella was born, how long did Hope stay here? 3 days, normal time for an uncomplicated birth. But she was very anxious to leave. And where did she go? I don't know. She paid all the bills in cash and left without a contact address. Cash? Where did an unemployed woman get the money to pay for a private birth? Nurse Carmen hesitated. She said someone had given it to her, a friend who wanted to help, but who couldn't get directly involved. Diane looked at Arthur. Could it be? No, he said quickly. I didn't know about Isabella's existence at the time. If I had known, I would never have let Hope go through this alone. At that moment, Arthur's cell phone rang. It was a number he didn't recognize. Hello? Arthur. The voice was Clarice's, and it sounded different from how he remembered. Colder, more controlled. Clarice, where is Isabella? She's safe with me, safer than she would be with you or your corrupt family. Clarice, she's a 4-year-old child. You can't use her as a weapon against me. I'm not using her as a weapon. I'm protecting her from you. There was a pause. Arthur, did you really not know you had a daughter? I didn't. If I had known. If you had known what? Would you have let your sister destroy her mother's life anyway? Arthur closed his eyes. Clarice, can we talk in person? I can explain everything. There's nothing to explain. I found out about Beatrice, about what she did to Hope, about how you all destroyed a family, and now I'm going to make sure Isabella has a chance to grow up away from this toxicity. Where are you? In a safe place. And before you ask, yes, I have legal authorization to be with her until a judge determines otherwise. Clarice, please, let me see my daughter. Your daughter? Her voice grew harder. Arthur, you spent 4 years without even knowing she existed. Hope went through pregnancy, childbirth, and raising her alone because your family threatened and persecuted her. That was Beatrice's fault, not mine. It was the fault of the entire Cunningham family. You are toxic, Arthur, and I will not let an innocent child be raised in that environment. And what's your plan? Adopt her? If necessary, yes. Arthur felt a fury growing inside him. Clarice, you left me 3 years ago because you said I didn't know how to be a husband. Now you want to be my daughter's mother. I left you because you chose your toxic family over building a real life with me. And look where that has led all of you. Where can I find you? You can't. I'll be in touch when I see fit. Clarice, wait. But the call had already ended. Arthur stared at his phone, feeling more helpless than he had ever felt in his life. What did she say? Diane asked. That she has legal authorization to be with Isabella, and that she won't let me see her. Nurse Carmen, who had been following the conversation, spoke up. Mr. Cunningham, may I suggest something? What? If this woman really has legal authorization, you need urgent legal help, but there's something else you can do. What? Look for Hope. If she is alive and wants her daughter back, no judge will grant custody to a stranger. But how do we find her? She disappeared 4 years ago. She may be closer than you think. Nurse Carmen opened a drawer in her desk. 2 months ago, a woman came here asking about the birth of a child in March 2020. She didn't want to give her name, but the description matched Hope's. Arthur sat up straight. What did she want? She wanted to know if the child was well, if she had been registered correctly. She seemed very worried. And did you tell her anything? I couldn't give specific information, but I said that the child had been registered and that as far as I knew, she was well. Did she leave any contact information? No, but she said she would come back when it was safe. Diane held Arthur's arm. Mr. Cunningham, this means Hope might be nearby, watching, trying to find out how Isabella is. But if she's nearby, why hasn't she tried to re-establish contact? Maybe because she's still afraid of the people who forced her to flee 4 years ago, the nurse suggested. Arthur looked out the window again, this time with renewed hope. Nurse Carmen, if she comes back, can you give her my number? Tell her I'm looking for her. Of course, and tell her that. Arthur hesitated, choosing his words carefully. Tell her that Arthur found out the truth and wants to repair the mistakes of the past. As they left the hospital, Diane held Arthur's hand. We will find them, both of them. I hope so, Diane. because if we don't, I might lose my daughter before I even get the chance to be her father." At that moment, somewhere in Asheville, two women watched the hospital's activity from a distance. One of them held a 4-year-old child who was playing with a teddy bear named Samson. The other spoke softly on the phone, coordinating the next step of a plan that would change everything forever. Arthur and Diane spent the night in a small hotel in downtown Asheville, but sleep did not come for either of them. Arthur paced the cramped room, constantly looking out the window, in the impossible hope of seeing Isabella walking down the street with Clarice. Diane remained seated in the armchair, praying softly and holding in her hands an old photo of Hope that she always carried in her wallet. At 6 in the morning, Arthur's phone rang. It was Walter, and his voice sounded exhausted. "Arthur, I need you to come back to Charlotte urgently." "Did they find anything about Clarice or Isabella?" "No, but something happened to Beatrice. She disappeared during the night." Arthur sat on the bed. "What do you mean, disappeared?" "Her maid called this morning, saying she didn't come home last night. Her car is in the garage, but there's no sign of her in the apartment. She might have gone to a friend's house." "Arthur, there are signs of a struggle in her office. The desk is overturned, papers scattered on the floor, and the safe drawer is open and empty." A chill ran down Arthur's spine. Someone took her by force. "It seems so, and there's something more worrying. I found a message on her answering machine, received yesterday at 8 in the evening." "What message?" "A female voice, electronically altered, saying, 'You have 24 hours to return everything you stole, or your family will pay the price.'" Arthur exchanged glances with Diane, who had woken up and was listening to the conversation. "Walter, could this be connected to Isabella's disappearance?" "That's what I'm afraid of. Arthur, I think there are more people involved in this story than we imagined. I'm coming back now. Wait, there's something else. The message specifically mentioned that the child is safe for now, but that can change if there is no cooperation." Arthur's blood ran cold. "They have Isabella, or they know where she is. Arthur, I think Clarice might be working with other people." "That doesn't make sense. Clarice hates me, but she's not a criminal." "Maybe she was deceived or blackmailed." During the drive back to Charlotte, Arthur tried calling Clarice several times, but the number she had used the day before was out of service. Diane remained silent for most of the time, lost in thought about her missing daughter and granddaughter. When they arrived at the company office, they found the police conducting a forensic investigation. The lead detective, a middle-aged man named Robert Farias, received them with skepticism when Arthur explained the complex situation involving Beatrice, Hope, and Isabella. "Mr. Cunningham," the detective said, "are you telling me that your sister stole from the company, that your housekeeper has a daughter who's been missing for 4 years, and that your ex-wife kidnapped a child who might be your daughter?" "I know it sounds confusing, but—" "Confusing is an understatement. I need facts, not conspiracy theories." Walter approached with a folder. "Detective, I have here all the evidence of the financial embezzlement committed by Beatrice Cunningham. These are documents that prove fraud over 4 years." The detective quickly examined the papers. "These documents will be useful for the investigation of the financial crimes, but they don't prove a connection to her disappearance." "What if she was kidnapped because of the thefts?" Arthur asked. "It's a possibility we're investigating, but you need to understand that kidnapping is a federal crime. If it's confirmed, the case will be out of our hands." At that moment, Beatrice's secretary, a nervous 50-year-old woman named Martha, approached the group. "Sorry to interrupt, but I remembered something important about yesterday." "What was it?" the detective asked. "Mrs. Beatrice received an unexpected visitor around 5 in the afternoon. An elegant woman, short hair, said she was a lawyer." Arthur straightened up. "Did she give a name?" "Dr. Clarice Mendonça. She said she was here to discuss matters related to the custody of a minor." "That was my ex-wife," Arthur murmured. How long did they talk? The detective asked. About an hour, but they left together, and Mrs. Beatrice seemed very nervous. Where did they go? I don't know. Mrs. Beatrice dismissed me early, said she wouldn't be back for the day. The detective noted the information. Mr. Cunningham, I need you to come to the station to give a formal statement about this whole situation and bring all the documents related to the financial crimes. After the police left, Arthur, Walter, and Diane gathered in the devastated meeting room. The place where the confrontation with Beatrice had taken place 2 days ago now looked like an abandoned battlefield. Arthur, Walter said, I think I understand what might be happening. What? What if Clarice didn't kidnap Isabella? What if she found out who was really behind the persecution of Hope all these years? Explain better. Think about it. Beatrice said she didn't hire anyone to persecute Hope after she left town. But someone was persecuting them, forcing them to move constantly. Diane leaned forward. Do you think there were other people interested in silencing my daughter? Exactly. And now these people have found out that Hope had a daughter, that the child has been found, and that the whole truth might come out. So they kidnapped Beatrice too, to force her to give back everything she stole, money that might not have been just hers. Arthur felt a revelation forming in his mind. Walter, do you think Beatrice was working with other people on the embezzlements? It's possible. $300,000 over 4 years isn't a lot of money to justify so much fear and persecution, but if she was just a pawn in a larger scheme, a scheme that Hope discovered accidentally. At that moment, the company phone rang. Martha answered and then called Arthur. It's for you, sir. The person says they have information about your daughter. Arthur picked up the phone with trembling hands. Hello? Arthur Cunningham? The voice was female, but different from Clarice's. Yes, this is he. My name is Hope Moore. I think we need to talk. The world stopped. Arthur had to lean on the table to keep from falling. Hope? Are you okay? Where is Isabella? Isabella is safe with me, but there are things you need to know about what really happened in the last 4 years. Where can we meet? At the city park near the lake. In an hour. Come alone. Hope, Arthur, there are very dangerous people involved in this story. People who have already killed to keep their secrets. If you bring someone or call the police, they might find out where I am and hurt Isabella. Killed? What are you talking about? 1 hour, City Park. And Arthur, your ex-wife is with me. She helped me understand what was really happening. The call ended, leaving Arthur in a state of shock. Diane ran to him when she saw his expression. Was it her? Was it my daughter? Yes, Hope is alive, and she has Isabella with her. But there's something about dangerous people, about deaths. Walter stood up. Arthur, this could be a trap. Or it could be our only chance to find out the whole truth. You can't go alone. She said if I bring someone, Isabella could get hurt. Diane held his arm. Mr. Cunningham, my daughter wouldn't hurt anyone. If she asked you to go alone, it's because there really is danger. But what danger? Who are these dangerous people she mentioned? Walter went to the window, looking out at the city he had known for decades. Arthur, there's something I never told you about the time we discovered Beatrice's embezzlements. What? I suspected she wasn't acting alone. Some of the shell companies she created had hidden partners. What kind of partners? People with a history of money laundering, tax evasion, crimes against the financial system. Beatrice may have gotten involved with criminals without realizing the seriousness of the situation. And now these criminals want their money back? Or they want to eliminate all the evidence, including the witnesses. Arthur looked at the clock. He had 45 minutes to get to the city park. The most important decision of his life was before him, trust a woman he barely knew, who had his daughter, and who could be leading him into a deadly trap. "I'm going to the meeting," he finally said. "Arthur, no," Diane protested. "Diane, 4 years ago, Hope tried to tell me the truth and was stopped by Beatrice. 4 years ago, she had my daughter and was forced to flee to protect the child. Now she's giving me a chance to fix all of this. And what if it's too dangerous? Then at least I will have tried to be a father once in my life." Walter sighed. "If you're really going to do this, at least take your phone on. If something goes wrong, we want to be able to find you." "Deal." As he headed to his car, Arthur thought about the irony of the situation. He had spent his entire life building a business empire, accumulating wealth and power. But now, the most important thing in his existence, the possibility of knowing his daughter, depended on a risky meeting in a public park with a woman he had unknowingly betrayed and who had spent 4 years fleeing the consequences of his family's actions. The city park was almost empty when he arrived. Only a few morning runners and a group of seniors doing Tai Chi near the lake. Arthur walked slowly towards the designated spot, his heart beating so hard he was sure anyone nearby could hear it. That's when he saw them. Hope was sitting on a bench near the lake, holding the hand of a small girl who was playing with a teddy bear. Next to them, recognizably tense, was Clarice. When Hope saw him approaching, she stood up slowly. At 28, she seemed to have aged a decade. Her face had lines of worry that didn't exist when she worked for him, and her eyes carried a deep sadness that made Arthur's heart ache with guilt. "Isabella," she said gently to the girl, "remember I told you about your daddy? He came to visit us." The girl looked at Arthur with curiosity, without fear, but also without the recognition he secretly hoped for. To her, he was just another adult stranger. "Hi," Isabella said shyly. "Are you the Arthur that Mommy always talked about?" The child's simple words hit Arthur like a punch. He knelt to her level, fighting back tears. "I am, little one, and you are more beautiful than I imagined." That's when Hope said the words that would change everything. "Arthur, there's something you need to know about why we really fled the city and about who killed Isabella's father." Hope's words echoed in the air like distant thunder. Arthur remained kneeling before Isabella, but his eyes fixed on the girl's mother, trying to process what he had just heard. "Isabella's father was murdered?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. "Arthur," Hope said, looking nervously around the park, "there are things you need to know about that night 4 years ago, things Beatrice never told you." Clarice, who had remained silent, approached the group. "Arthur, maybe we should go to a more private place. Hope is afraid of being watched." "By whom?" "By the same people who killed Charles Henderson," Hope replied, picking Isabella up. The girl snuggled against her mother as if she felt the tension in the air. The name hit Arthur like a revelation. Charles Henderson, the engineer who worked in the company's project department? Yes, Isabella's real father. Arthur felt the world spin around him. But Beatrice said I was the father. "Beatrice lied about that too," Clarice said, her voice filled with controlled anger, "just as she has lied about almost everything for the past 4 years. Hope pointed to a more remote spot in the park, near a small wooden bridge that crossed a stream. They walked in silence, Isabella playing distractedly with Samson, oblivious to the gravity of the adults' conversation. "Arthur," Hope began when they sat on an isolated bench. "On that December night in 2019, you were indeed drunk and came to get your car keys. We talked, you cried about Clarice, and I comforted you as best I could. I remember that. But nothing intimate happened between us. You fell asleep on the office sofa, and I covered you with a blanket before continuing my work. Then why did Beatrice?" "Because 2 weeks later Charles Henderson approached me. He had discovered the irregularities Beatrice had been committing and wanted my help to document everything." Arthur looked at Clarice, who confirmed with a nod. "Go on," he said. "Charles and I started investigating together. He had access to the financial systems. I had access to the offices during the night. We discovered that Beatrice wasn't just embezzling money from the company. What else was she doing? She was facilitating money laundering for a group of corrupt businessmen from DC. She used the supermarket chain to clean dirty money through fictitious purchases and sales." Clarice leaned forward. "Hope, tell him what Charles discovered on the computers." Charles found files that proved some of the company's suppliers didn't really exist. They were shell companies, created to receive payments that were then redirected to offshore accounts." "And how much did that represent?" "Much more than the 300,000 Walter discovered. We're talking about millions of dollars over several years." Arthur ran his hands over his face. "My God! And I never suspected a thing. Beatrice was very smart. She kept you focused on the day-to-day operations while manipulating the strategic financial side." "And how did Charles find this out?" "By chance. He was working on an expansion project and needed to access historical financial reports. That's when he noticed the discrepancies." Isabella started to get restless, so Hope put her down to play near the stream, always keeping her in sight. "Keep telling me," Arthur said. "Charles and I fell in love during the investigations. We spent entire nights gathering evidence, and we ended up getting emotionally involved." Hope's voice softened as she spoke of Isabella's father. He was a good, upright man. He wanted to expose the corruption even though he knew it could destroy his career. What happened to him? In February 2020, Charles said he had collected enough evidence and was going to see you to tell you everything. But before he could, Hope's voice failed. Clarice completed, "He had a car accident on the highway between Charlotte and Asheville. He hit a tree on a curve he knew perfectly." "You think it was?" "It wasn't an accident," Hope said firmly. "Charles was an experienced driver, and the day before the accident he had told me he was being followed." "By whom?" "We didn't know at the time, but we later found out that the businessmen from DC who worked with Beatrice had connections to very dangerous people." Arthur felt a chill. "And you? Why weren't you also targeted?" "Because no one knew I was involved in the investigations. Charles never mentioned my name to anyone, as a way to protect me." Hope looked at Isabella, who was throwing pebbles into the water. "But I was pregnant with his child, and when he was gone, I was left alone with all the evidence." "Why didn't you come to me?" "I tried, but every time I got close to you, Beatrice would appear and push me away. She said that if I told you anything, she would make sure I was arrested as an accomplice." "And why did she invent the story that I was the father?" Clarice answered that question. "Because if you found out you had a daughter, you would start asking questions. But if you believed the child was the result of a drunken night you didn't remember, you would be too ashamed to investigate." "And when you were fired?" "Beatrice found out I was collecting more evidence. She planted false documents in my locker and accused me of leaking information. But you had the real evidence about her crimes." "I did. That's why I fled to Asheville when she fired me. I knew that if I stayed in Charlotte, something bad could happen to me too." Arthur looked at the child, not his biological daughter, he now realized, but a child who had suffered the consequences of a corruption he had failed to detect in his own company. "Hope, where is this evidence now?" "It's safe, but there's a problem." "What is it?" "The men who killed Charles have found out he had a daughter, and they know I have the evidence that can destroy their entire scheme." "How did they find out?" "Through Beatrice. When you started investigating her embezzlement, she panicked and told them everything. She said there was a woman with compromising evidence and that she had a daughter." Clarice turned to Arthur. "That's why I intervened. When I found out this whole story, I realized Isabella was in real danger. How did you find out? Beatrice came to me a week ago, desperate. She said dangerous men were pressuring her to hand over the evidence Hope had, but that she didn't know where to find her. And how did you manage to find Hope? Through the hospital in Asheville. I left a message with the head nurse, saying I was a lawyer and had information about the safety of Hope's daughter. Hope continued. When Clarice contacted me, I was panicking. I had seen strange men watching the places where I usually took Isabella. And you decided to work together. Clarice convinced me that the only way to protect Isabella was to expose everything publicly. But we needed to make sure you all knew the truth first. At that moment, Arthur's cell phone rang. It was Walter. "Arthur, where are you? We have an emergency." "What happened?" "They found Beatrice. She's in the hospital, severely injured, and she's asking to speak to you urgently." Arthur looked at Hope and Clarice. "Did they hurt Beatrice?" "Who?" Walter asked. "The people involved in the corruption scheme." "Arthur, what are you talking about? What corruption scheme?" "It's a long story." "Which hospital?" "Charlotte General Hospital, ICU. Arthur, she said she has something important to tell you before." "Before what?" "The doctors don't know if she's going to survive." Arthur hung up and turned to the two women. "Beatrice is in the hospital, severely injured. She might be dying." "It's a trap," Hope said immediately. "They want to lure you to a place where they can control you. Or Beatrice really has something important to tell me before she goes." Clarice stood up. "Arthur, if you're going to the hospital, you can't take Hope and Isabella. It's too risky. But I can't leave them here alone." "They can stay at the apartment I rented," Clarice said. "It's a safe place. No one knows where it is." Hope picked Isabella up again. "Arthur, before you go, you need to know one more thing." "What?" "The evidence I have doesn't just prove the crimes of Beatrice and the DC businessman. It proves that Charles discovered something even bigger. What could be bigger than large-scale money laundering? A corruption scheme involving public school food contracts throughout the state of North Carolina, millions of dollars embezzled from government school lunch programs. Arthur felt as if he were discovering he lived in a completely different reality than he had imagined. And our company was involved in this? As an intermediary, yes, Beatrice facilitated the transfers through the supermarkets, receiving a percentage of everything. That's why they killed Charles. That's why they killed Charles. And that's why they will try to kill anyone who threatens to expose the scheme. Arthur looked at Isabella, who was innocently playing with her teddy bear, completely oblivious to the danger that hung over her life. "Hope," he said, "after I talk to Beatrice, we're going to end this once and for all. We're going to hand over all the evidence to the proper authorities." "Are you sure?" "Once we do this, there's no turning back. These people will do anything to stop us." "Then we'll make sure they can't." As they walked back to the parking lot, none of them noticed the black car watching them from a distance, nor the man speaking softly on the phone, reporting on their every move. The war was just beginning. Charlotte General Hospital was in a flurry of motion when Arthur arrived. Ambulances were coming and going from the ER, but he headed straight for the ICU, where Walter was waiting for him in the hallway with a somber expression. "How is she?" Arthur asked, still trying to process everything he had discovered in the park. "Critical. She suffered severe head trauma and has several broken ribs. The doctors say someone assaulted her with extreme violence." "Can she talk?" "She's conscious, but very weak. She's been asking to speak with you since she arrived." Walter hesitated. "Arthur, she's very scared. She keeps repeating that they'll try again." A doctor approached them. Dr. Fernando Araujo, according to his ID, a 40-year-old man with a professionally compassionate expression. "Mr. Cunningham, I'm the doctor in charge of your sister. She insisted on speaking with you, but I must warn you that her condition is grave." Can I see her? For a few minutes only, and any sign of agitation, we will have to interrupt the visit. Beatrice was unrecognizable. Her face was swollen and covered in bruises, one eye completely shut. Tubes and wires connected her body to monitoring machines, and her breathing was labored. "Arthur," she murmured, when she saw him approach the bed. Her voice was weak, almost inaudible. "I'm here, Beatrice. Who did this to you?" "The men. From D.C. they wanted. The evidence Hope has." "What evidence exactly?" "Beatrice, I need you to tell me everything." "It wasn't just money laundering, Arthur." Each word seemed an immense effort for her. "It was school lunches, fraudulent contracts." "Hope already told me that, but I need to know who these people are." Beatrice tried to move in the bed, wincing in pain. "The leader. His name is Augustus Reed, a businessman from D.C., brother of the legal consultant I brought to our meeting." The revelation hit Arthur like a punch. Dr. Marcus Reed, the lawyer who had attended the tense meeting 2 days ago, was involved in the scheme. "Beatrice, do they know where Hope and Isabella are?" "I don't know, but they're looking." "Arthur, forgive me. This is not the time for that. You need to focus on getting better." "No, I'm not going to get better." Her tears mixed with the dried blood on her face. "I did terrible things, destroyed families. They killed Charles because of me." "Beatrice, do you have evidence against these people?" "In the safe at the company. Combination. Mom's birthday." She closed her eyes, exhausted from the effort. "Arthur, you protect the girl. They will try to use her to get to Hope." A nurse entered the room. "Sir, you need to leave now. Her blood pressure is dropping." Arthur stood up, but Beatrice weakly held his wrist. "Arthur, I always loved you, even when I did everything wrong." "I know, sister, I know." When he left the room, Dr. Araujo was waiting for him in the hallway. "Mr. Cunningham, I need to be frank. Your sister's condition is very delicate. The next 24 hours will be decisive." "Doctor, her injuries, were they really caused by assault?" "Without a doubt, and whoever did this intended to cause as much damage as possible." Arthur walked away with Walter, both processing the implications of what he had just discovered. "Walter, I need you to go to the company now and open Beatrice's safe. The combination is our mother's birthday, June 15th, so it should be 1506. What am I looking for? Any evidence against Augustus Reed and the school lunch scheme? Beatrice said she kept things there. And you? Where will you be? I need to protect Hope and Isabella. If these criminals find out where they are..." Arthur was interrupted by his cell phone ringing. It was an unknown number. "Hello? Arthur Cunningham?" The voice was male, polite, but with a threatening tone. "Who wants to know?" "My name is Augustus Reed. I believe my sister has already mentioned my name to you." Arthur felt his blood run cold. "What do you want?" "I want to resolve this situation in a civilized manner. I have a proposal that can benefit all involved. I'm not interested in negotiating with murderers." "Murderers? Mr. Cunningham, I think there's been a misunderstanding. I'm a respectable businessman trying to resolve a business conflict. A conflict that left my sister in the ICU. I'm very sorry for what happened to Beatrice, but she refused to be reasonable." Augustus's voice grew colder. "I hope you will be more sensible. What are you proposing?" "A meeting. You, me, and the evidence that Mrs. Hope has collected. A fair exchange. The evidence for the financial records that compromise your company." "And Hope and Isabella?" "They stay out of it, of course. We have no interest in harming innocents, like Charles Henderson was innocent." There was a significant pause. "Charles Henderson made poor decisions. I hope you will make better ones." Where and when? Tonight, 9 o'clock, at your central supermarket warehouse. Come alone. And if I refuse, then we will have to use less civilized methods to resolve the situation, and I guarantee that other innocent people may get hurt in the process. The call ended, leaving Arthur with an impossible decision in his hands. Walter, who had heard part of the conversation, faced him with concern. "Arthur, this is obviously a trap." "I know, but if I don't show up, they'll go after Hope and Isabella. And if you do show up, you could be murdered like Charles. Then I need to prepare myself properly." Arthur called Clarice. "How are things there?" "Hope is nervous, but Isabella is fine. She's playing as if nothing is happening." Clarice's voice sounded tense. "How was it with Beatrice?" "She's in a very bad state, and she confirmed everything Hope told us." Arthur hesitated. "Clarice, the leader of the scheme, called me. He wants a meeting tonight." "Arthur, no! If I don't go, they will look for you." "Then let's give the evidence to the police right now." "There won't be time. The meeting is at 9 tonight, and processing all the evidence will take days." Hope took the phone. "Arthur, if you're going to this meeting, you need to take part of the evidence as a guarantee, but not all of it." "What do you mean?" "I have copies hidden in 3 different places. I can give you a part to use in the negotiation, but if something happens to me or you, the other copies will be automatically delivered to the press and the authorities." "How did you arrange that?" Charles was very paranoid. He created a security system where if we didn't confirm our safety every 48 hours, automatic letters would be sent to journalists and prosecutors. "And is this system still working?" "Yes, we have about 20 hours before the next confirmation is needed," Arthur quickly calculated. "That means if something happens to me tonight, the evidence will be automatically exposed tomorrow." "Exactly, and Augustus Reed knows this." "How would he know?" "Because Charles told Beatrice about the system before he died, and Beatrice must have mentioned it to them when she was being tortured." The situation was becoming more complex with each revelation. Arthur had to decide whether to trust the security system created by a man dead for 4 years, or to try to find an alternative solution. "Hope, where can we meet for you to give me part of the evidence?" "Shopping mall, food court, in 2 hours. It's a public place, safer." "And Isabella?" "She stays with Clarice. It's better that she's not seen in public until we resolve this." After ending the call, Arthur turned to Walter. "Besides going to the safe, I need you to do one more thing." "What?" "Contact public prosecutors, investigative journalists, anyone who can receive the evidence and follow up even if something happens to us." "Arthur, you're talking as if you're saying goodbye." "I'm preparing for all possibilities." Arthur looked towards the room where Beatrice was fighting for her life. "This war started 4 years ago when Charles discovered the corruption. Tonight, it ends. And if you don't make it out of the meeting alive, then at least I will have ensured that Hope and Isabella have a chance to live in peace." As they left the hospital, neither of them noticed the man watching them from the parking lot, speaking softly into a cell phone and confirming Arthur's movements to someone on the other end of the line. From that moment on, every step Arthur took was being monitored by people who had already killed once to protect their secrets, and who would not hesitate to kill again. The shopping mall was bustling when Arthur arrived to meet Hope. Families were shopping, children were running through the corridors, and the normality of daily life contrasted dramatically with the tension he felt. Hope was sitting at a discreet table in the food court, a small folder by her side. "Did you get everything?" he asked, sitting across from her. "These are copies of about 30% of the evidence. Fraudulent contracts, bank transfers, recordings of conversations between Charles and some of the people involved." Hope slid the folder across the table. "If something goes wrong tonight, this would be enough to open an investigation. And Charles's automatic system, It's programmed to activate at 9 tomorrow morning if I don't enter the security code by then. Arthur quickly examined some of the documents. They were photographs of contracts showing inflated values for supplying food to public schools, suspicious bank transfers, and handwritten notes that seemed to be from Charles, documenting conversations he had witnessed. Hope, there's something I need to ask. Why did you decide to trust me after everything my family did to you? She was silent for a moment, watching the movement around them. Because Charles always spoke of you with respect. He said you were a man of integrity, that if you knew about the corruption, you would do the right thing. But I didn't know. I was blind to everything happening in my own company. You were suffering because of the separation, and Beatrice took advantage of that to keep you away from financial matters. Charles understood that. Arthur felt the weight of the guilt he had been carrying for days intensify. If I had been more present, Charles would still be alive. Charles knew the risks when he decided to investigate. He did it because he believed it was the right thing to do. Hope lightly touched Arthur's hand. Now you have the chance to finish what he started. And Isabella? How do I explain to her that the man she knows as her uncle is actually nothing to her? Arthur, you may not be Isabella's biological father, but in the last few days you have become the father figure she never had. Charles passed away when she was just a few months old. To her, you are the first man to show paternal love. The words touched Arthur deeply. Over the last few days, he had felt a genuine love growing for that little girl, regardless of blood ties. If I don't survive tonight... Oh, don't say that. Hope, if something happens to me, I want you to know that I consider Isabella my daughter, regardless of DNA. And if necessary, fight in court for her to have the right to everything I've built. Arthur, promise me this. Isabella deserves to grow up without worrying about financial security. And you deserve to be compensated for the 4 years of suffering my family caused. Hope nodded, tears shining in her eyes. I promise. Arthur looked at the clock. It was 6 in the evening. I have to go. Walter must be waiting for news about the safe, and I still have to prepare for the meeting. Be very careful, Arthur. These people killed Charles without a second thought. Don't hesitate to use force if necessary. When Arthur arrived at the company office, he found Walter examining documents spread across the meeting room table. The accountant looked visibly shaken. What did you find? Arthur asked. Much worse than we imagined. Walter showed a pile of contracts and photographs. Beatrice documented everything, probably as life insurance in case something went wrong. What kind of documents? Contracts between the company and the state of North Carolina for school lunch supplies, values inflated by more than 40%, and these here. He separated a specific folder. Are records of meetings between Beatrice and Augustus Reed, where they discuss how to divide the embezzled money. Is there a specific mention of Charles? Yes, and it's disturbing. Walter opened a folder with Beatrice's handwritten notes. According to these notes, Charles had discovered not only the overpricing, but also that they were supplying lower quality food to the schools, putting children's health at risk. Arthur felt nauseous. They were poisoning children for more profit? Apparently so. Charles had lab analyses proving that some of the food supplied was contaminated or expired. That's why they killed him. That's why they killed him. And that's why they'll try to kill you too if they find out you have this evidence. Arthur put the most important documents in the folder Hope had given him. Walter, did you manage to contact the journalists and prosecutors? Yes. I've scheduled meetings for tomorrow morning with 3 different public prosecutors and 2 investigative journalists. If something happens to you, the evidence will be released anyway. Arthur, I still think you shouldn't go to this meeting alone. If I take someone, they might take it as a sign that I'm not negotiating in good faith. And if you take the evidence, they might just kill you and take it all. That's why I'm only taking part of the evidence. They know about Charles's automatic system. At 8:30 in the evening, Arthur was standing in the parking lot of the central supermarket warehouse. The place was deserted, lit only by a few security lights that cast long shadows between the buildings. He carried the folder with the partial evidence and had left detailed instructions with Walter about what to do if he didn't make it out alive. His cell phone rang at exactly 9 o'clock. "Punctual. I like that in a businessman," said Augustus Reed's voice. "Where are you?" "Entering the warehouse now. The left side door is open." Arthur walked slowly towards the building, each step echoing in the silence of the night. When he pushed the door, he found the inside of the warehouse dimly lit by a few emergency lamps. "Mr. Cunningham," a voice said from behind him. Arthur turned and saw a 50-year-old, well-dressed man, accompanied by two other men who were clearly bodyguards. Augustus Reed had the appearance of a respectable businessman, but his eyes were cold and calculating. "Did you bring what we agreed upon?" Augustus asked. "I brought a sample. You'll receive the rest when I have guarantees that Hope and Isabella will be safe." "Mr. Cunningham, I don't think you quite understand the situation. You are not in a position to make demands." "Actually, I am." Arthur opened the folder. "This evidence proves you were killing children with contaminated food. If this leaks to the press, nothing is going to leak anywhere." "It will. Charles created an automatic system that will activate in 12 hours if Hope doesn't enter a code. And even if you kill all of us today, there are copies of the evidence with prosecutors and journalists." Augustus smiled, but the smile didn't reach his eyes. Charles was always too smart for his own good. "Did you kill him because you found out he had set up this security system?" "We killed Charles because he refused to accept a generous compensation to forget what he had seen." Augustus began to walk around Arthur. "Just as your sister refused to give us the evidence she had stored. And now you want me to do what they refused to do. I want you to be smart. We have a proposal that can benefit everyone." "I'm listening." "You hand over all the evidence, disable Charles's system, and in return, you receive enough compensation to start your life over anywhere in the world. And Hope and Isabella? They receive the same opportunity. A new life, away from the US, with enough resources to live comfortably. In other words, exile. I prefer to call it early retirement." Arthur pretended to consider the proposal. "And if I refuse?" "Then you, Hope, and the child will join Charles, and the evidence will never reach anywhere because we will intercept it before it's released. You have informants in the police and the press? Mr. Cunningham, you have no idea how many important people are involved in this scheme. Prosecutors, judges, journalists, politicians. We're talking about millions of dollars embezzled over years." The revelation of the extent of the corruption hit Arthur like a punch. "How many children did you poison?" "We didn't intentionally poison anyone. We just supplied products with quality standards adjusted to maximize the profit margin. Expired and contaminated products. The market has its demands, Mr. Cunningham. Either you adapt or you're eliminated." Arthur looked around the warehouse, recognizing the place Isabella had described in her nightmares, the colored boxes, the sweet smell of food, the ceiling lights. This was where Charles had worked, where he had discovered the terrible truth about what they were doing. "I accept your proposal," Arthur finally said. Augustus smiled genuinely this time. "A wise choice. But I have one condition, which is, I want to see Beatrice one last time before I leave the country, to say goodbye. That can be arranged. And I want guarantees that Charles's system will be disabled only after Hope and Isabella are safe. That can also be arranged." Arthur extended the folder. "Then we have a deal." But as Augustus reached out to take the evidence, Arthur noticed something that changed everything. On the man's wrist was a distinctive scar, the same scar that Charles had described in his notes as belonging to the man who had threatened him days before his death. Augustus wasn't just the head of the scheme. He had personally murdered Charles. The discovery of the scar changed everything for Arthur. Charles had described that distinctive mark in detail in his notes, mentioning how the man who threatened him had a crescent moon-shaped scar on his right wrist. There it was, exactly as described, on the wrist of Augustus Reed. "You killed Charles personally," Arthur said, his voice colder than he intended. Augustus stopped smiling. "Mr. Cunningham, I think you're confusing things. Charles described your scar in detail. You personally went to threaten him before you killed him." Charles had a car accident. Charles was murdered by a man with a crescent moon-shaped scar on his right wrist, exactly like yours. The atmosphere in the warehouse changed instantly. The two bodyguards positioned themselves strategically, blocking the exits. Augustus completely lost his facade of a civilized businessman. "Since you've found out, it doesn't matter anymore," he said, flexing the wrist where the scar was visible. "Charles was an annoying idealist who didn't know when to stop. And you thought killing him would solve the problem. It did, until your family decided to play detective." Augustus gestured to the bodyguards. "Now we'll have to solve this the hard way." Arthur took a step back, calculating his options. The warehouse was large, full of aisles between high shelves. If he could get to the back, there was an emergency exit he knew about from when the building was constructed. "Hope is right about you," he said, trying to buy time. "You're murderers hiding behind expensive suits. We are pragmatic businessmen. Charles could have accepted our offer and would be alive today." "What offer?" $100,000 to forget what he had seen, but he preferred to play the hero. "And now you want to make me the same offer?" "I'll make you a different offer." Augustus waved to the bodyguards. A grave next to Charles's. Arthur threw the folder into the air, scattering documents, and ran towards the stock aisles. Behind him, he heard Augustus shouting orders for the men to follow him. The warehouse was a labyrinth of metal shelves reaching to the ceiling. Arthur knew every aisle, every shortcut, an advantage he hoped would be enough to reach the emergency exit. Behind him, the heavy footsteps of his pursuers echoed between the metal structures. "Cunningham!" Augustus shouted. "You're only delaying the inevitable." Arthur reached the back of the warehouse and found the emergency door. When he pushed it, he discovered it was locked with a padlock, a security change that hadn't existed when the building was built. "Looking for a way out?" a voice asked from behind him. Arthur turned and found one of the bodyguards just a few feet away. The man was large, muscular, and clearly experienced in violence. "Where's the rest of the evidence?" the man asked. "What other evidence?" The bodyguard took a step forward. "We don't have time for games." At that moment, police sirens began to wail outside the building. The bodyguard hesitated, looking towards the windows where blue and red lights were beginning to flash. "What?" the man muttered. The confusion was enough for Arthur to act. He grabbed a metal bar that was leaning against the wall and struck the bodyguard on the arm, causing him to scream in pain and retreat. "Police! Everybody on the ground!" a magnified voice shouted from outside. Arthur ran back through the aisles, trying to reach the main entrance. He found Augustus and the second bodyguard standing in the middle of the warehouse, clearly confused by the unexpected arrival of the police. "How did they know?" Augustus asked, more to himself than to anyone else. "Because not everything went as you planned," Arthur said. The main door of the warehouse was broken down, and a team of police officers stormed the place with guns drawn. In front of them was Detective Robert Farias, the same one who had investigated Beatrice's disappearance. "Augustus Reed, you're under arrest," the detective announced. Augustus tried to run but was quickly surrounded. As he was being handcuffed, he shouted at Arthur, "You have no idea what you've just done. There are very powerful people involved in this." "I know exactly what I've done," Arthur replied. "I finished what Charles started." After Augustus and the bodyguards were taken away, Arthur found himself alone with the detective in the warehouse. "How did you know I was here?" he asked. "Your housekeeper. Diane called us 2 hours ago saying you were going to a dangerous meeting. She said if we didn't show up, another innocent person would be murdered." "Diane? How did she know?" "Apparently, she and Walter were worried and decided to follow you. When they saw you were coming here alone, they called the police." Arthur smiled for the first time in days. "And the evidence that Charles and Hope collected? It's already being analyzed. Based on what we've seen so far, we're going to be able to dismantle a corruption network that has been operating for over 5 years. Rome and Hope and Isabella, they're safe. As soon as we arrested Augustus, the rest of the organization started to fall apart. We already have several arrests happening in DC and other cities." An hour later, Arthur was at the apartment where Clarice had hidden Hope and Isabella. The girl ran to hug him as soon as he entered. "Uncle Arthur, you're back!" Isabella shouted, grabbing his legs. "I'm back, little one, and now we're all going to be together." Hope approached, tears in her eyes. "Did you do it?" "We did. Augustus is arrested, and the scheme is being dismantled." "And Beatrice?" "She's recovering. The doctors say she'll survive." Clarice, who had been watching the whole interaction, addressed Arthur. "There's something we need to talk about." "What?" "About our future, about what happens now." Arthur looked at Isabella, who had gone back to playing with Samson, completely oblivious to the adult complexities around her. "Clarice, I know you came back to protect Isabella, and I'm grateful for that. But—" "Arthur, I came back because I realized I made a mistake 3 years ago. I left you when you needed support the most. You couldn't have known about the corruption. I could have stayed and fought by your side instead of running away when things got tough." Hope spoke up. "You two saved my daughter. Regardless of what happens between you, I will always be grateful." "Hope," Arthur said, "I want you and Isabella to come back to Charlotte. I want you to be part of our family." "Arthur, you don't have to." "It's not about obligation, it's about love. In the last few days, I've discovered that family isn't just about blood, it's about choice, protection, care." Isabella looked at the adults. "Can Mummy go back to work at the place with the colored boxes?" Everyone laughed, the innocence of the question relieving the tension of the moment. "She can, little one," Arthur replied. "In fact, your mommy is going to be the new administrative director. We need someone honest to take care of the numbers." 3 months later, life in Charlotte had found a new rhythm. Beatrice had fully recovered and was serving her sentence in a semi-open regime, working in rehabilitation programs. The case against the corruption network resulted in the arrest of dozens of people and the recovery of millions of dollars embezzled from school lunch programs. Arthur and Clarice had reconciled and were planning a new wedding. Hope worked at the company, helping to rebuild the financial systems with complete transparency. And Isabella attended a private school where she was known as the girl who helped catch the bad men. "Daddy Arthur," Isabella said one afternoon as they played in the house's garden. "Mommy said, 'You're not my blood daddy.'" Arthur stopped pushing the swing she was on. "That's true, little one. Your blood daddy's name was Charles, and he was a very brave man. But can you be my heart daddy?" "I already am, Isabella, and I always will be." "And when you marry Aunt Clarice, will I have a mommy and a daddy together?" "You'll have a big family full of love." Isabella smiled, that smile that had won Arthur over from the first day. "I think Daddy Charles would be happy knowing you're taking care of us." "I'm sure he would, little one. I'm sure he would." That night, as he put Isabella to sleep, Arthur thought about how his life had changed completely. He had started as a successful but lonely businessman, focused only on business. Now he was a father by heart, engaged again, and part of a family united not by blood, but by love and the choice to care for one another. "Good night, my daughter," he whispered, kissing Isabella's forehead. "Good night, Daddy," she replied, already half asleep. Outside the window, the stars shone over Charlotte, witnessing the end of a journey that had begun with suffering and ended with hope, redemption, and a family that chose to love each other unconditionally, proving that the strongest bonds are those built by choice, not by chance. If you like this video, please subscribe to my channel. I promise to bring videos every day that will make your life happier. Comment what you thought of my story with a score from 0 to 10, and thank you very much.